Yep, for all you naysayers, we're back again this week with another episode of the Steel Target Paint Podcast. As always, it's me, Jeff Jones, and my partner in crime,
Steve Foster. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm going great, Steve. You know, it's been a good week. It's been a short week. We had Monday off. And, having Monday off, I was able to do some practicing. And, I just like to talk about some things here. I think that we can share some good information with our listeners. And the first topic I was hoping to talk about was, getting back into it. You've had a lot of things going on in your life that have nothing to do with shooting, that have taken you away from the range. That beautiful home range for stints. And, I thought we'd talk a little bit about, your theories and some of my theories about getting back into the sport. I've got some students that are coming back to me, and, I can share what I'm doing with them, and hopefully everybody can learn something from what we talk about. What do you think about that?
Sounds like a great idea. First of all, I want to know, who are these naysayers?
Have you been on the internet? Have you been on the internet? If there's a chance for someone to take the opposite position, that's the place it's going to happen.
I hear you. Well, they're still pretty distracted with the other shenanigans that we won't talk about.
So, okay, so you were off for a couple of weeks there. I mean, again, you had family things going on and personal things going on, and you finally decide, okay, I've got to get back on the range. Do you set yourself up with any expectations?
So that's a great question. I did have a period of time getting ready for my daughter's surgery that we went up to New York for. And then, of course, I was out of pocket for just over a week in the hospital. And then, of course, recovery from there. And sometimes life gets in the way of, new job and all those kind of things. And yeah, let's talk through that a little bit. I think that shooting is somewhat a perishable skill.
Absolutely.
We've talked about it before. 2 years ago or so, whenever it was, back in June, a couple of years ago, when I shot that sub 60, that didn't happen overnight. I mean, that was a pretty dedicated training regimen. I mean, shooting multiple times a week, not necessarily just once a week or once every other week. There are shooters out there that get to that level, and they can pick up right where they left off to some extent. But I knew what it took to get there, and we all have to make choices in our lives on, we want to spend our time doing that or spend time doing that. And I support 100%. I've seen, I've worked with some folks here recently that have that fire and want to be the fastest, and they want this or they want that. And, I support them 110%. Just don't get burned out on it, because there is other aspects to shooting that I think are extremely important, but it's great to be on the podium. It's great to be at a certain level where, I think I shared with you last year, I ended up winning my 100th major title, which is a significant accomplishment for me. But now that I've taken some time off, I went to the range here a couple weeks ago with somebody that I was training and shot. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I got to put the training wheels back on. But I had a focused training session on Sunday, albeit not long. It was just an hour, and typically, when I'm out there shooting, it's a couple hour event. I'm cramming down some rounds down range. But what I've shared with this particular person, and I share it with most of the people that I work with, is that you always have to start off when you walk down to the range. You have to go one for one. So let's say we focus on a stage. I think I got.
I've never said that, by the way.
I know. I know. You're one shot, one steal, but I know what you mean. So every time you walk and start a training session, this is just my personal belief, and this is what I teach is, it doesn't matter what the time is. You got to start off your first. I call it, because how I train, not to let too many secrets out of the bag. We always shoot stages. What I mean by stages is, we always shoot 5 strings, and then we take the best out of the 5, just like we're in a match, because I think you need to train for match conditions. And so on Sunday, I went down there with my Rimfire rifle open gun and shot 5 to go, and I went one for one. Again, it's been a while since I shot 5 to go. The last couple local matches I've shot Didn't have 5 to go. And, I shot I think it was maybe like a 205, 207, which, I felt like it was going to be like a 270 or maybe a
Sure.
3 second run because I was just very deliberate going one for one. And I was like, okay. And then as I would in a match, I just turned it up a little bit. And I was in the 192, 193 range. I was like, just the way I would shoot it in a match. So then I shot a 185, just as I would in a match. I shot a 174, and then so I had 4 good ones, and then I shot a 164, and I missed the elusive plate 4. And so I share that with you to say that before you work on speed or anything else, and you have to have that level of consistency, and more importantly, what I teach is control. So the next, so I got my baseline, I know where I'm at, and then I worked on my speed, and then before I leave the range, I dial it to back to my 95%. That targeted edge dial, I put it back to 95%, like I'm going to shoot it in a match, and then I think I shot a 720 or 723, where I would hopefully shoot that in a match. But there's certainly some times out there that were just had some blazing ones, but boy, did I have some fast ones that I only hit 2 targets. But
Well, I think let's stop for a second here because
yep,
you said a couple things there that I really want to share and how I share it when I train my students. And you talked about the people that want to get out there and they want to be the fastest and all that kind of stuff, and that's a great goal. But I always tell people you've got to be the fastest. Let's say I'm coaching little Timmy. You've got to be the fastest little Timmy. You can't be the fastest Grant Kunkel. There's already one of those. There's already a fastest, Lance Pratcher Jr. There's, you go through the names. There's already a fast Steve Foster. You got to be the fastest little Timmy you can be.
yeah,
And going out there and to your point, the whole, my mantra, grip the gun, go one for one, holds true in that respect because your one for one runs, and we both know, and everybody knows that one for one is not ping, ping. It's not just hitting the targets. It's one for one at your best speed.
right,
Is going to be the most important thing. But you've got to consider yourself the fastest you can be. So when I train my students, one of the first things I will do is say, when they walk up to the box, I'm going to say, what's your number? And they know what I'm asking is, what is your current peak average string time?
yep, that's exactly right.
And then, something you and I have talked about a little bit offline, I've picked up from other people and I've kind of changed on my own, is that first run, you want to be within 10% of your personal best. So if you're a 2-second shooter and you come out and you shoot a 220, you're right where you need to be. And it's also a good gauge to know that number, because if you come out and you shoot a 180, don't change anything. Just keep shooting 180s.
Oh yeah,
At least on the first 4, get 4 good ones in and step it up. And to your point, work on getting a little faster every time. But some people, they hit that peak on that first string. Some people being me and just about everybody out there, they hit that 180 on the first string. And the next thing you know, they're trying to get faster and faster and faster. And what they end up doing is just missing more and more and more.
yeah.
Because they've lost that focus. The next thing I wanted to ask you about is, I use the AMG Lab Timer. You use them. Do you, when you have that either really good run or you have you have what you feel is a good run, you look down at your time and you go, wow, that's not as good as I thought it was. Are you going back and looking at your draw, your splits, and trying to pick out, where it was you were slow?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the opportunity um as you shoot more, you don't have to look at the timer. You know exactly what's going on and where it's going on, and you look at the timer for confirmation of
Mhm.
what you should already know at a certain level. And that's more experience, grandmaster, top whatever the game. It. It's funny. I did that activity we were shooting, I don't know what stage it was. And I think it may have been roundabout. And I think I shot like a 155. And I said, yeah, that first time was probably 0.58, 0.6. And that's why it wasn't a 135 or 138. And they're like, yeah, it was a 61. It's like, how the hell do you know that? I said, well, I know how fast based on my speed, where I shoot that stage when, I'm performing at, where I've been at in the past. And so I think that it's important to understand where you need to speed up or where you need to slow down. But the number one piece of feedback that I have for people is that you need to be able to call your shots and be able to know where you're hitting on a plate or where you're missing a plate. And if you can't call your shot, that means you weren't looking at the dot or the front sight on the target when you pull the trigger, which,
Yep.
it's, yeah, you have to give every single target its diligence. And there are some targets you can quote unquote cheat, maybe plate two on Accelerator. Sometimes you can get away with some things,
Yep.
but you can't take any of those targets for granted, because as soon as you do, so Accelerator is a good one. And I've shared this with more than a couple people. For whatever reason, because I firmly believe everybody has a shooting tendency, and that's why people come to see me, is figure out, what's their tendency, what's going on, and how to fix it to get past a hump. But one of my tendencies on Accelerator, I point shoot plate four. Why the heck I started that? No idea, Jeff, but it's been going on for a couple of years. So whenever I get up to Accelerator, okay, keep your eye on the dot on that plate four when you squeeze the trigger. And undoubtedly, because our subconscious kicks in, and that's where we want to be shooting. I'll point shoot it, and I'll get the stop plate, pull the trigger. Like, boy, I point shot plate four, and I think I heard a hit. It's just one of those kind of things. So
Well,
I guess
I'm glad you brought up
re-
Accelerator. I think Accelerator is maybe one of the if you were to pick one stage to start somebody training on, I think Accelerator is just a perfect stage to do it, because it's got everything. It's got, a draw to a smaller plate. You've got this, virtual drive-by in plate two. Then you've got this longer transition over to plate four, and it's a big plate, but it's also at 20 yards. Then you've got this reverse coming back. If you're shooting at 1, 2, 4, 3 stop, you've got this transition back to a 12-inch plate, but it's at 20 yards. And then you've got a snap to the stop. So it's got a mixture of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And, the one thing that I notice, and I do use a timer a lot, and I talk to people and I look at splits, is that transition from 2 to 4, if you're shooting it in that pattern, is where most people are losing time, because they're not snapping over. And to your point, when you say you're point shooting that, you're driving to a spot and pulling the trigger.
That's exactly right. The index is, and I hit it maybe 99% of the time. It's a high ratio, but if I'm knocking it out, that means my index is perfect when I'm going to that target and changing directions.
Well, and you mentioned calling your shots, and I had people for years say, do you call your shots? And I used to say, I'm not good enough to call my shots. And then I realized, when I was in matches and I was calling my own misses, or practice and I was calling my own misses, I was realizing, I am calling my shots. I'm calling exactly where I missed it. I missed it low left. I missed it high right. I didn't get there fast, didn't pull the trigger too soon. I missed it early, that kind of stuff. And, for me, as far as calling my shot to know I hit it, that's where I still tend to be more of an auditory, where I'm listening for it. And I know a lot of people are going to be saying, oh, well, you're not going to be as fast as you can. It's just how I've always done it. And it's tough. It's tough to break. So I'm confirming the hit, not with a visual aspect of, I knew the dot was on the plate, but I know I need to go back to a plate for one of two reasons. I was off the plate, or I didn't hear a ding. So technically, in that respect, I guess I am calling my shot, but I'm not worrying about going back to a plate, because I'm not saying, oh, that dot was on the plate. I know I pulled the trigger when the dot was on the plate, and I move on. It's more, I heard the ding.
Yeah. No. Yep.
Because there's been a lot of times too where my dot's on the plate and I pull the trigger and I still miss because I'm moving the gun after I pull the trigger and still impacting the trajectory of the bullet.
And I think that is, and I call it a bad habit, but I do the same thing. It's just part of when I started shooting. It was the same thing. I was always listening. Trying to validate because I was trying to go so fast, and I would know to make it up more on the listening and then the sight thing. And I've tried a couple different methods to, earplugs that you can't hear anything, and it's interesting. I'm sure there's a lot of people that have different feedback for that type of thing, but I try not to. But I have found myself as kind of like a second or a third check, if you will,
Yeah.
is to listen for it. Yep.
Yeah. Well, everybody's got their own style, and how many times you had somebody come up to you and go, well, what's the best way to shoot this stage?
Oh, I wish I had a buck.
Yeah.
Put the kids
And
through
the
college.
answer is it
Go
depends.
1 for 1.
Well,
Yeah,
one for one for sure.
The best way to shoot any stage.
But it depends because I've got right-handed shooters that shoot great left to right, but I've got right-handed shooters that shoot great right to left. And you have to shoot to your advantage. So when you're looking at a stage like Pendulum, very symmetric, what would be another? Smoke and Hope is another one, very symmetric stage. You've got to go out to plate 1, you've got to go out to plate 4. So the distance you're going to travel is the same regardless.
Yeah.
It's find out where your strengths are. And, you've got one now at the house, and I haven't done it for a while because I haven't had many new students that are brand new to the game, but I take them down to the plate rack.
Oh yeah. The plate rack will teach you a lot about how well you shoot or not.
Yep. Well, that's really good. That's really good. So now when you talk about your practice times, I mean, let's just say a good average session for you, how many rounds you putting down range?
It's tough to get carried away.
No, it's easy to get carried away because I've been there. I've had 700 rounds training sessions.
Oh yeah, that's nothing, Jeff. If I'm in that 3 to 5 range, 3 to 500, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
I don't find many times that I go out there and I shoot less than 250 or 300 rounds.
Okay.
Even if it's not a big serious kind of thing. But when I was training a little bit more heavy, it wouldn't be anything to shoot 1,000 rounds in a training session.
Single gun, multiple guns.
Multiple. I try to vacillate into different platforms, right? It's whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. I don't train as much with my PCC as I probably should or could for whatever reason, Jeff. I don't know. From
primers.
No, it's not that. I don't know what it is, but back in 2017, 2016, the end of 2016, beginning of 2017, when I started shooting for PCC, which I had a lot of opportunity to shoot pretty much any PCC out on the market, and I actually bought a JP and then did well, and then said, hey, let's sell some guns, and that's where the sponsorship developed about, and that's probably. We talked about sponsorship in the past here on the podcast, and if we've got a couple minutes, I want to come back to it. But I don't know what it was. As soon as I picked up that gun, I could shoot it faster, and I did. There was a stretch of time for probably 2 years that I could shoot my PCC faster than any other gun that I had
Mm-hmm.
And Kurt Grimes, he's listening. He's like, how do you shoot that brick of it? Because at the time, that gun was probably, he said 12 pounds, but I think it was like 7 or 8. Full 16-inch. It wasn't a light contour barrel. And I said, man, check this out. This is awesome. He's like, what the hell are you doing with this thing? Boat anchor? But, at the time, way back when, shooting a sub 70 was a big deal. I think I shot a 67.52 or something like that. It was 2017, 2018 at the Alabama State Steel match. That was the fastest time and it held for a while the fastest time I ever shot in PCC. So for whatever reason, shooting a PCC, I don't know. I don't shoot it as much, but I just kind of pick it up because I think some of the skills are transferable. You know, you still need to practice with it, but going back and forth from iron to open, I've kind of slowed down a little bit on the iron side stuff as I get older. I need to get my prescription where it needs to be, but I try to go between pistol and rifle. Certainly, I still want to be really, really good with a rifle. So I spend maybe just a little bit more time with my open rifle. But I think going back and forth different platforms, it helps you refocus on the fundamentals, especially if you're doing a long training session to get ready for a match.
Well, what's funny because I've got a bunch of people that are shooting both guns, and whenever they walk up to the line, and they tend to always walk up and they're going to shoot their rimfire rifle open first, and that's fine. And they get there with their PCC, and I just look at them and I go, it's just a loud 22.
Yeah.
It's just a louder 22. There's nothing that's different about it. And, one of the things, and whether it's true or not, but one of the things that I've always thought about with regards to the difference is there's this subconscious more respect for a PCC because it tends to be heavier. It's a 9mm bullet is more aggressive than a 22, and so people's fundamentals actually are better with a PCC than it is than a rimfire rifle at times. It's easy to get sloppy with any gun, but I think it's easier to get sloppy with the rimfires.
And here's why I think that's a fantastic point, because I've even noticed this with myself over the course of my shooting career, is that it is easier to get sloppy with a 22 because they're not as heavy.
Yep.
So you don't feel like you need to grip them as tough, or not tough. You don't want to squeeze the living crap out of it, but with a PCC, knowing that they're typically heavier, you have to put a little bit more into it to hold the gun and those kind of things. And don't get me wrong, when you're moving fast and you get a little extra weight, it's a little bit more forgiving from a stability perspective than some of the lightweight guns. And, everybody's got their own style and what they can do and so on and so forth. And sometimes I do think, and this is personal opinion, I'm sure there's some people out there like, no, and won't listen to us ever again. That's cool. I get it. We live in a free society and we still have free speech. Is that I think you can get a gun too light. I think that with a 10-22, I shoot a Wyland chassis, which I love because of the adjustability, so on and so forth. Did I tell you? Small off subject. Bill Robinson's making. I've got couple prototypes here. I got to throw one on. I've meant to do it 100 times, but I'm looking at one right now.
I actually have. He had it. He came to our match last month, and he had it on his gun, and I got to shoulder it, and it's nice.
Yeah, it feels good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I just haven't shot with it yet. But anyway, I think that with some of these ultra lightweight barrels, they may be for some folks, and I think that there's, especially if you have somebody that maybe not be able to support a gun that's heavy or more than 4 pounds or something like that. Maybe I'm thinking junior shooters and maybe some folks with some disabilities, those kind of things. I think there's a great market for some of these ultra lightweight barrels. I see Todd at Wyland. He's got a 5-ounce barrel coming out. Whoo-wee, son. I'm going to get one just to try it, to be honest with you. But I think sometimes the gun can get a little bit whippy, depends on your shooting style. So just be careful. If you can shoot one and shoot one fast, have at it. Good for you. That's awesome. But was working with somebody recently, and I gave them a 15-ounce barrel compared to, I don't know, like a 10-ounce barrel. And times increased just because of the stability. No, it's like a light switch. And so sometimes you got to match the equipment to your shooting style if you don't want to change your shooting style.
100% agree. It's amazing that one of the things I've always said is you can't buy your game. A lighter barrel is not going to make you faster. It has the potential to make you faster. Again, as you just pointed out, if your skill set allows you to shoot a lighter barrel.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, one of the biggest things, because I also shoot a Magnum Research and a Weiland chassis, and I love it. But before that, I shot a Volquartsen in a classic Magpul M22 stock. And I got to GM with it. And I love that gun. I still have that gun. And when I moved to the Magnum Research in the Weiland, it definitely had that whippy feel. And I had to get comfortable with the fact that I had to do some things differently compared to the other gun.
Yeah.
Doesn't make one better or worse than the other. It's just, you have to be prepared for that. I noticed it specifically years ago when I bought a 2245 light.
Oh, yep.
Which you know, and I shoot, you know, I shoot a Volquartsen Scorpion, and I love that gun. It's, you know, shout out to Kurt Omensetter. He's the one that turned me onto them years ago. I had my victory break going into a match, and I had my 2245 with me, and I was like, okay, I'll just shoot this. And then I looked at the schedule, and I was rooming with Kurt, and I said, hey, Kurt, can I borrow your gun? He's like, sure. And I did well in the match. I think I won my class at the time, which was like B. I mean, it was early in my career, and got home and put together an order for a Scorpion, and have not shot anything since. And that's a heavier gun compared to, you know, a 2245. And I could not control a 2245.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Adam Reno is a great. Adam, are you listening to me? Adam, are you out there? He is blazing. My man shot a 69 last weekend at was that last weekend or the weekend before? I think it was Indiana. But anyway, he shot a sub 70 with an iron sight pistol, and I think he shoots a lightweight upper. I'm telling you, Adam, call me. I'll send you an upper. Because I'm a dealer for Volquartsen, and I sell a ton of Volquartsen Mambas. You put that upper on your gun, I think your times will go down because he transitions the gun well. But that just a little bit extra stability. I noticed that as soon as I started shooting my CWA. I mean, you know, I went my first CWA, which was one of the first production CWAs, was all aluminum, which was great, but just a little bit too light. And then we went to the 2211 style. Went with a steel frame. Oh my goodness, it game changer. I mean, it makes me a better shooter. So, and some of that's your tendency. And you know, with handguns, one of my tendencies is not to grip the gun hard enough because I shoot a lot of 22s. And then when I'm not shooting that well, like I was practicing with in my open gun 2 weeks ago, just because, you know, sometimes you just got to keep it fun, right? I need to draw and shoot more open, but you know, same thing with a revolver. It's, you know, why are we doing this? Because we want to have fun. Sometimes it's stress relief, and sometimes competition, sometimes building relationships and all those kind of things. But man, it's first string or two I shot the open gun. Man, this is okay. Hey, channel your inner Jeff, grip the gun, and it's amazing the difference when you really put concentrated effort on gripping the gun and what happens to the stability in your time. So,
you know,
I think you make a great point with a 2245 light.
Yeah. For those that have listened to Lanny Basham, you know, he talks about the different circles, and you know, you've got your conscious, your subconscious, and your ego, and you want to have those circles all equal. And then as you get better, each circle is getting bigger and bigger. And for the pistol, like early on when I started shooting pistols, when I switched over to shooting a lot of the centerfire pistols, and especially the revolver, it was all about focusing on that draw and that grip and getting that. And because that is the foundation for everything else that happens on the stage. You know, the beautiful thing about rimfire is you get to set your grip. You get to set that stock in your shoulder. You get to set your grip on the pistol. And so if you have a bad grip, you have no one to blame but yourself. Now, granted, you have the same thing to do, but you get to set that. You know, when you add in the concept of a centerfire and having to draw the gun, you've got a whole new dynamic that you've got to add into the game.
Yeah.
And it's fun. But you talk about the revolver, and the one thing I loved about the revolver early on was that I literally had no expectations, and it was an amazing experience and fun. Everyone is like, oh my God, revolver's so hard. Yeah, it is hard. But if you go out there with no expectations and focus back on all the skills that you've learned up to that point, and the whole concept, grip the gun, go 1-for-1, twist at the hips, it suddenly your times start coming down. And it's kind of like, that I heard somebody talking about golf, and what keeps people going back to golf is that one drive out of 18 that is just
Oh yeah.
gorgeous. And it's the same thing. You get that one run, for sake of argument, you're an A-class shooter, and you get that one string that's a GM string, and you're like, wait a minute, I can do this. This,
Yep.
and then you keep pressing, and you keep pressing. And you talked earlier about all the different barrels that are out there and all the different parts. And I have always stated to people, you can't buy your game, but what you can buy is reliability.
Oh yeah.
And you can if you take care of your equipment and you've got good equipment behind you, and this goes down to not just the gun, but also the magazines and all that stuff, and you keep it clean, you don't have to worry about that when you're at a match. And how many times have you been in a match where you've had a stovepipe and you've actively got to think about not thinking about that on the next string? You have to stay focused on the fact that, okay, the gun's going to run. I'm not going to worry about that.
And we've talked about it before. I mean, I maybe been a year or so ago. Don't get me wrong. I think that people that are getting into the game, do what you can afford. Don't let,
Yes.
you don't have to shoot $2,500 gun to have fun.
Yep.
But over the course of time, the more serious, and this is my advice to folks is, the more serious you get, that's when, for a pistol, there's two in my mind. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some unicorns out there where people get 2245s or victories or so on and so forth to run really well. But my advice to everybody is to step up to a Volquartsen or go to a CWA. I shoot a
I couldn't agree
CWA.
more.
I love the feel of it. But the Volquartsen with the tandem cross lower, the Mamba, they're now making the Mamba X.
The Mamba X, yeah.
Which is a flat top, but then they just released the Scorpion version of the Mamba X, so you can get it in a Mark III now, whereas you couldn't not too long ago. So it's what you're getting with Volquartsen, and then with CWA is you're getting reliability, you're getting a custom gun, custom feel. The 2245 is what I recommend for everybody, especially if you want to shoot any sort of 1911 or 2011 at some point, because same grip angle. And I think I've only sold one, maybe two with the target frame.
Mm-hmm.
The rest has been the 2245 by far, majority. I think I've only sold one or two Scorpions. The rest have all been Mambas and Mamba X. I've sold a ton of Mamba X's, mainly the 6-inch, and that's what I recommend. But you get that consistency and reliability, and if you have an issue, they take care of you. And then if you want the custom feel and spec it out yourself and get some awesome colors and the right trigger length for you and reliability, that's where you get a CWA. More money, but those are the options when it comes to a pistol. Rifle, boy, that kind of opens up a little bit. There's a reason why I shoot a Magnum Research, and it's been great. And there's a reason why I shoot a Powder River Precision Trigger, because I had issues with another popular trigger group and another popular gun. And, I can't shoot at the level that I want. Look, I want it to make sure it's reliable, and it's not me that's the issue, right? Or I want it to be me that's the issue, not the equipment.
Right.
Same thing with the Volquartsen. I mean, they're great guns, but over the course of time, if you're going to take it serious, you're going to want to step up I know it's a lot of money, and do it, plan it out and budget it and put it, in certain aspects, but don't be messing around. And the other thing I will say about that, and that's why I'm such a fan of the Wyland chassis and honored that Todd, asked me to give a little input on the chassis, is it's adjustable. You're gonna spend $1,000 on a rifle, or the full Quartzens are a little bit more money than that. Let's say you're spending $1,500 on a gun or whatever that number is, and you're shooting a non-adjustable stock that's a couple $100. Look, spend the $350 or whatever, or if you want a colored and laser, come see me, Jeff. And then
Well, let's
get it,
go.
get, get it
Let's
set
talk
up for
about that for
you.
a
Get
second,
it set up
because
for
I
you.
mean, I started the game shooting a classic laminated stock.
Yep.
I know you've got a custom painted Big Daddy stock that is one of the laminated stocks.
I've got two of them. Yes,
Right.
I do.
We all shot those. And we all started out. And as you progress, early on in your career, and this goes to everybody, early on in your career, I think just about any gun that is reliable is probably going to get you to master, and maybe into grandmaster. But if you want to further get into that classification and drive those times down, that's when you're going to have to start shooting some of these guns that we were talking about here, or look at, I mean, I've told this story, and I'm going to tell it again, and it's about parts. And I had a student who was shooting a stock Ruger Target bull barrel iron sight pistol.
Mm-hmm.
And she was doing okay. And I finally said to her dad, I said, it's time to upgrade the internals. They didn't have the money to upgrade the whole gun, but they had the money to upgrade the internals. So we got an accurizing kit from Volquartsen, put it in there, and didn't tell her. And she shot her first string, went 1 for 1, turned around, and you never saw a bigger smile on a girl's face.
Yeah, look, that's let's say all you can afford is, and guns are getting expensive and demand is high and it's tough to get stuff. But let's say you find a $600 Ruger 1022. And let's say you get the light model that's got the aluminum barrel.
Yep.
And if it's reliable for you, shoot it. The very first thing you should do is replace the trigger once you have that kind of money, and it does make a difference. You don't need a pound and a quarter, a pound and a half. Get a Powder River Precision. Mine are all two and a quarter, and then with a couple rounds. From my perspective, they're right at 2 or just a tick under 2. Or get a Volquartsen trigger. I'm not going to mention another popular trigger because they don't support the sport, but 2 and a quarter, something that's reliable, a little bit of take up, short reset, and that will make, I think, from my perspective, it made me a better shooter overnight, going from a 1522 platform to a 1022 with a lighter trigger. It made me a better shooter overnight.
100%. And for years early on, whenever I would start a new gun, I would just shoot, the stock gun.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to say, it's not the trigger that's holding me back.
Yeah.
You look at, let's go back to Accelerator. If your transition from plate 2 to plate 4 is 0.6 seconds, it doesn't matter how good your trigger is.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
Okay. And offline, you and I have had this conversation constantly where, you're looking at buying parts and doing upgrades and getting different guns to squeeze out, tenths of seconds on stages, because that's what you're looking to, that's where that's where you're at, because you've got the skills, how to shoot the stages well, and things like the trigger, things like the weight, things like not having an adjustable stock are slowing you down.
Yeah.
Yep. So.
And back to the equipment thing real quick, and I'm not a sponsored person by them at all, although I've got admiration for them because they're at quite a few matches that I've been at in the last 24 months is Tipman. You can get a $600 Tipman, get ready to go. And I just did a modification of one for somebody that probably listens to the podcast. So I got a, let's call it a $600 Tipman if that's what you can afford. We put a elf trigger in it, cut down the barrel, had it sleeved, put a tandem cross grip, the minimalistic stock that I shoot on all of my Mission First Tactical minimalist stock that I shoot on all my AR style guns, and then I put a carbon fiber tube on the front end. Oh my good lord, it's a 4-pound gun, like
Yep.
4 pound and like half an ounce. That gun balances well, shoots well, extremely reliable. So you've turned a pretty reliable gun into a race gun.
Yep.
It's not a $2,000 gun, but it's not a $600 gun anymore.
Right.
But that's a great example on, you can take one and, work with somebody like me to get you into, something like that. Of course, it's got a cool ass paint job. Can I say that on the,
You
on the air?
absolutely can say that.
Did I? And it's all engraved up, of course. Kind of a cool thing. But you can build those types of things and still be budget conscious and add as you go and those kind of things, or plop down money on a Magnum Research or
Well, the thing
Fortune
about
or something like that.
the Tipman, and if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, but their 22 version is also based on that kind of AR style platform, correct?
Oh, it is. And me and somebody else that's in the gun industry, we went back and forth because I started shooting an AR style platform, the MMP 1522, and I just couldn't get the reliability. Everybody's got to replace the extractor and those things, and sometimes the ejectors.
Listen,
But
it's a good gun. It's a good gun to start. Let's we're not here to diss anybody, but it's also a production line manufactured gun.
But I couldn't, outside of the heavy barrel, and some other people have made, barrels that go on those. And again, some people have some and they swear by them, but I had 3 or 4 of them. I started off with 1, then went to 2, and then I had backup guns. But it was something about the poly receiver and the type of trigger that I tried to lighten. I think I was getting flex, and maybe the trigger technology, like the elf trigger. I've got sitting one right here that's all a self-contained unit. JP triggers, same exact way. They make these modular triggers where, you don't have to, you do have to, put in a shim and, adjust some Allen heads, but you slide 2 pins in and it's all self-contained.
Yep.
Maybe that would have worked in MP 1522, but I had a trigger that was supposed to be, 2.25 pounds. I couldn't get it less than 3 pounds. Most of the time I was like 3, and I think it was because of the flex of the receiver, and maybe it's just the gun that I had. But that's the good part about the Tipman. It's the it's a budget minded gun when it comes to grip and butt stock and those kind of things. But the platform itself, oh, it's nice. It's aluminum upper lower, just like a regular AR. A little proprietary on the magazines, but they make a ton of these things and they're not super expensive. So that's an example where you can get into something and just kind of build it up. But I'm telling you what, I've shot, some of I think Tandem Cross worked with them on a Redline gun, which feels pretty good because they took weight out of the barrel. Saw one at Metal Madness, but man, worked with TACOM to get an option like this, and he chopped down a couple barrels, and we went a little bit longer than his first ones, and the jack run like a sewing machine, and the balance of the gun for a 4-pound gun. Oh no, it's amazing. But again, it's you get started for $600, and then you could add to it, or you can reach out and get you spend a little bit more than $600.
Sure. Well, where I was going with this too, being it based on an AR style feel, is that if you're also shooting PCC, you're going to have that same feel.
Yep.
There is a different feel when I pick up my PCC, which is a JP, compared to my Magnum Research in a Weiland chassis.
Yep.
And so if you're a shooter that feels you want to have your guns all feel the same way, there's an option, because while there are PCCs out there that don't follow the AR9 platform style, they don't tend to be very competitive.
Yeah.
There's one, I'm not going to say the name of it, but it's like a tube with a trigger is what you get. And and I've seen people shoot them, and they're just not set up well for our game. Well, that's cool. So
yeah.
go ahead. You got another point.
No, I was just gonna say I can't stress this point enough, Jeff. Is that I've had a safe full of, I would call them mistakes. I mean, they were because I didn't know.
Yep.
There's popular platforms, and if you look at the top, 20 shooters in rimfire pistol, what are they shooting? You look at the top 20 shooters in rimfire rifle open, what are they shooting? You know what I mean? It's no
Yep.
disrespect to some of these other guns, but they're not shooting a Thompson Centerfire 22. And again, I think it's a great gun, and
Yeah.
all those kind of things. But they're not shooting a cricket either. You know what I mean? It's
Absolutely.
it's model after what they're doing. There's a reason why they're shooting them, and some of them are fully sponsored shooters, and they get guns for free. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of us that, again, back to the sponsorship thing. Oh no, I bought my first whatever, and then I engage with companies on. But I got to believe in the product, and
yeah.
But you got to either go all in as soon as you know you're getting pretty serious, or you want to get serious. Lay down the money and get what you need to be successful, so you take that thing off the plate. If not, make sure you're buying a platform that you can upgrade.
And I'm not going to say all shooters will do this, but I know Steve's done it. I've done it. I've seen a lot of other shooters do it. And that is, if you want to feel what a gun feels like shooting, grab somebody after a match, make sure you clear it with the match director or the range master, get to a bay and shoot the guns that you're interested in. I mean, Steve did it at Worlds and let me shoot his new JP5. And he let a lot of other people do it. And I've been at matches. I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I borrowed Kurt Omensetter's gun. I've seen Steve pull a gun out of his car and give it to a competitor to shoot.
Oh yeah.
I've done the same thing. It's like we want, and they tend to sell themselves.
Absolutely.
So well, that's really cool. Let's turn the table a little bit here. And so we've talked a little bit about, getting prepped and getting out there, but now let's talk about, do you do anything different when you're getting ready for a major?
I've had the same routine. I think we talked about this maybe a year or two ago. I've got the same routine. It's not necessarily a checklist, although I started down that path, but I'm very methodical on, and I'm thinking, as I'm going on a trip, because that's coming up in a couple of weeks, South Georgia match, is when I load everything, it's always in a specific order, that it's always all my magazines are loaded. And then as soon as I get done loading, like all my rimfire stuff, I then put my rimfire ammunition that I'm using the match in there, and then I go gun by gun and make multiple trips to the vehicle to make sure I'm focused on, I've got the gun, got the mags, got this gun, got the mags, got this gun, got the holster, got the mags, those kind of things to make sure that I'm successful. Over the course of time, in terms of shooting preparation, major matches, I used to spend quite a bit of time, a couple of weeks, sometimes a month, depending on what's going on, and shooting quite a bit leading into some of those major matches. I've slowed down on that a little bit, but if I want to be super, super competitive, it's one of those things. It's eye, hand, brain to finger coordination, and that's why you've seen over the course of years when they set up the World Speed Shoot, they always have practice days ahead of time. That's really for people to get tuned up. It's not necessarily practice as it is everybody getting tuned up and getting in the zone. I remember when Kenny Nagata 2 years ago, first time he was shooting the World Speed Shoot, nobody knew who he was besides me. What was he doing? He got there like the beginning of the week, and he was practicing every day, and that allowed him, he was going to shoot well regardless, but I think that allowed him to kick it up a gear. And that's why you see some of these other famous shooters back when a lot of people used to shoot center fire. now in a rimfire match. You're welcome for that, Jeff. I think it's funny because people get their panties in a wad about it, but it makes me chuckle. Sorry if I offended you. No, I'm not really sorry.
You're not going to offend me. I
Just
shoot them
kidding.
all. I shoot
No,
them
no,
all.
no. But a lot of the center fire guys, that's exactly what they would do. They would
Oh, yeah.
always the day ahead of time, they would shoot at least one full match the day prior. So it used to be shoot rimfire on Friday, center fire iron sights on Saturday, and then open on Sunday. Back in 2012, my first world speed shoot, that's what they did. Even in 2016, I think that was the format, and then it kind of went away from there. But all the pro shooters back then, on Thursday, they went to practice. They would shoot the full match on the practice base. They'd shoot that match. After that match got done, they would go get their iron sight pistol, shoot the whole match on the practice base, and then go shoot on Saturday. And after Saturday, you know what happened? They would get their open guns and shoot at least a full match prior to Sunday. And so they weren't doing that because they got a lot of free ammo they didn't know what to do, and they had a lot of free time they didn't know what to do. There's a reason for that, and it's to help
Right,
get
and I
those
think,
synapses shorter together.
I worked the practice bays the last time I worked the Worlds, which was the first year was in Alabama. And what I also learned specifically from those pro shooters, and I mean, I'll call them up by name. It was Max, it was Casey, it was Jesse, Munecki was up there. They were shooting 2 matches a year in Steel Challenge.
Mm-hmm.
They were shooting back then. It was U.S. Steel and the Worlds. They weren't shooting locals. They weren't shooting other area matches. Of course, back then there weren't many area matches to begin with. But so it was, to your point, it was that tune-up, remembering what they had to do in this game. Most of them were still shooting, USP, shooting a lot of USPSA. So they were comfortable again shooting the gun, but it was getting them focused on what they needed to do in Steel Challenge.
Yep.
So, well, very cool. Listen, you had sent something earlier, and I wrote it down. And you said you want to talk about sponsorship. So, give us your thoughts on that.
I think I'll give you just a little bit more than what I already have, and then because I know we're getting probably rolling up on an hour, and I could talk about sponsorship for hours.
Oh, we did an entire podcast on it. So.
Oh yeah,
Cliff notes.
So let me share a perspective in my role. Not talking about my role at Steel Target Paint as the captain and making selections on who
and
gets
a hell of a
sponsorship, who
captain
doesn't.
you are. Let me just point that out.
Yeah, contracts are about up, aren't they? No, just kidding. So I was talking with a sponsor that I've been with for, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years. And I would say have developed a close relationship with them. And, we hadn't talked in, a couple months. And, we talked for an hour tonight before the podcast. And we were talking about sponsorship. One of their kids is involved in something, and I won't give out too many details so you can't connect the dots. But, and his son is trying to get sponsorship for what he's doing, and he's got all of this stuff together, so on and so forth, and the level of commitment that he's getting from sponsors is pretty tough. And the same thing happens in the gun industry. I think there's a lot of people before us that ruined a lot of it for good shooters that are good at promoting products, because a lot of companies, you go and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do, blah, blah, blah. If you just go and ask for your handout and you're not going to say what you're going to do for whatever, then, you're not going to be successful to begin with, or at least I'm not young enough and built right enough for that. You know what I mean, Jeff?
Yep, I do.
So because, it's some of that stuff sells for, instead of us old guys, it's my advice, and listen to my good friend Kenzie. She was on Scott Cortson's podcast talking about sponsorship. Is if you want to shoot for JP, or you want to shoot for this, or you want to shoot for Tandem Cross, how did Mike Baker become? I think he's the co-captain, maybe the full captain. I'm not sure, of Team Tandem Cross.
He got a tattoo.
But that's not what got him there. What got him there was buying the product, believing in the product,
yeah,
promoting the product, and and that's what companies like to see. They don't want to see, well, here's all the major matches I got and I'm the best shooter in the world. Okay, there's a couple of companies that probably still really, really want that, but that's not what sells product. It really isn't. There's, the top fraction of 1%. Yeah, maybe that helps, but and that's what, he was being very kind in his words to me, because we were talking about some sales stuff, and we were talking about a certain product that I represent. And he's like, "Man, every time you post about that, it's like my sales go crazy." And I said, "Well, it's not because of I just post about it. It's because you go to the range and you don't want you want to share what makes your setup successful, and people want that shortcut. People don't want the tuition of a gun safe full of product, and unfortunately, it takes some of us time to maybe make moves here or there to get the support. At least this is my philosophy of stuff that runs and works, and I can stand behind and those kind of things. But
Yeah.
it,
Well,
it was pretty interesting. We talked about that for almost an hour. He had somebody reach out to him and wanted XYZ 1, 2, 3. He asked him, "So what am I going to get in return?" Oh, it was, well, I'm gonna, post once on social media for hundreds of dollars. That's really what you're gonna do. And it wasn't more about the short term, is more about the long term. And so I think that's my other, because I've had some pretty intense conversations with some of the best shooters in our game about this very topic of, just because in the example I use, and pardon the expression, there's always going to be a pretty girl walking down the street that's going to want to be with you. And you got to go with it's more about the relationship than it's the 6 month or 12-month interaction from time to time. And I
well,
think some people have learned that lesson.
yeah. Well, we've talked about this, and I'll add my take on it too. Is that you get noticed because of your shooting. Okay, you get sponsored because of who you are.
Yeah, and
That's my
that's a
opinion.
great point. Great point, and you get retained as a sponsor because
Yes.
who you are. Yep.
You know, you look at a lot of the people. You look at Mike. We'll take Mike Baker. We'll call him out. Mike and I we're always joking at each other like we hate each other. And actually, I couldn't think of anybody I'd rather see at a match. I think Mike's a great person. I think Elsie's a little better, but Mike's
Yeah,
Mike's a good dude.
I don't think anybody here listening on the podcast is going to disagree with you.
But here's the thing about Mike. He's approachable. Here's the thing about you. He's approachable. Here's the thing about me. I'm approachable. I don't have a whole lot of sponsors. That's not the route I'm going. And that's not right. It's not wrong. It's just who I am. Okay. I'm very pleased with the small group of people who companies I represent. And I know you are. We've had him on the podcast. I'm going to call him out. Hunter's HD Gold.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times people are like, "Hey, those are rubies you're wearing." And the first thing I do is take them off. I go, "Here, you want to try them?"
Yeah.
And
but
it's and that's because I know of a lot of people who are great shooters who don't have the mentality, and you need to go into the ideal of not what are they going to do for me? What is the manufacturing to do for me? It's like, what can I do for them?
exactly.
And if you go in with that mentality, and I was just talking with I had to go into a PT session today for my shoulder, and I was talking with a doctor, and we got talking a bunch of stuff, and I said, we're a small game. Bowling is multiple factors bigger than we are. You can pick many other sports much bigger than we are. And so there's being a small pool, there isn't going to be as many people that are going to get those super deals. But that doesn't mean you just can't find someone who you like. I mean, the perfect example is what you said. You bought a JP, you shot it, you loved it, and then you took the opportunity to approach them. with a plan of what I think I can help you do to sell more guns, which is their goal. And I think that's where a lot of people are like, well, I want to get a jersey and I want to shoot for them and I want to get my matches paid for. And it's like, yeah, but what are you going to do for that manufacturer?
Yep.
That sponsor. So, well, you're right. We're at about an hour. And you know what? I'm going to do you a solid today. And I'm going to tell everybody that if you want a discount at rangestore.net, make sure you use our code STPodcast10 for 10% off your order. Steve, it's always great talking with you. Good times.
It's good talking with you tonight, Jeff. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been the Steel Target Bay Podcast. Hope you had fun. Bye-bye.